Support for Disrupted comes from the Connecticut Office of Film, Television, and Digital Media.
Brandon J. Dirden has appeared in TV shows like The Americans.
The FBI may assess, determine, consider, or claim, etc., but it is not appropriate to say that the FBI feels.
Urgent memo from the director.
The Bureau does not feel, Stan.
He starred as the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. in the play All the Way, alongside Bryan Cranston. He's also a director, most recently of Yale Repertory Theater's production of Eden.
You West Indian, ain't you?
What of it?
Don't go getting in no pout. I was only asking, is all. I ain't never really known no West Indians before.
Well, you know one now.
The play Eden takes place in 1920s Manhattan. Eustace Baylor comes from the South and falls in love with his neighbor, Annetta Barton. Annetta's family is from the West Indies, and her father, Joseph, does not approve of Eustace.
This is your country. Go out and prove it. You live where you're told, you do as you're told. They call you Negro. Were this really, truly your country, would it not be called Negro land?
From Connecticut Public Radio, this is Disrupted. I'm Kalila Brown-Dean. This hour, we're talking about the power of theater. Brandon J. Dirden is an actor, director, and associate arts professor in the graduate acting department at New York University's Tisch School of the Arts. Brandon, welcome to Disrupted.
Thank you so much for having me. Pleasure to be here.
Before we talk about Eden, and there's so much I want to talk about with that production, I want to talk about you and how you came to theater. You grew up in Houston, Texas. What was your relationship to theater as a young person?
Well, you know, Houston, that great bastion of theater, right? No, actually, Houston does have a pretty lively theater scene, although we're probably more known for our oil and gas and medicine. But there's an artistic community there, and I was lucky enough that my dad, although he never practiced the arts as a living, made a living doing it, he was a black man, raising 5 kids. So good luck feeding those 5 kids on, being an artist in Houston. But he had a passion for it. And so he did a lot of community theater growing up. And I remember growing up, since he was the only one a lot of times in his cast with a house, the cast parties were by default at our house. And so I remember Friday nights, Saturday nights, the house just rocking with all kind of strange people from the theater scene. But every Sunday morning, religiously, my mother would make sure we got up and went to church. And so sometimes I'd get up and be stepping over people who were, sleeping in the living room because, maybe they were too inebriated to drive home the night. So my parents were always responsible. Like, if you had too much, you got to stay here. So my house was just pretty open to, to the artistic type. And that's where I've, found my tribe, as they say. And so from an early age, I was just kind of inundated with it. And I would see my dad from time to time on stage. And my mom, she was a first grade teacher at the elementary school I went to, and she directed the school plays. And I think I was the first out of the 5. I'm number 4 out of the 5, but I was really the first one to say, yeah, this is what I want to rock with. My other siblings were, they were artistic and athletic, but I was the first one to say, yeah, I want to do theater. And then my younger brother, Jason Dirden, who's also a professional actor, he followed suit. But so it's always been a part of our house, and that's, thanks to both my parents.
I wonder, is there a particular production that you remember, whether you saw it on stage or you were in it yourself, that really solidified what you were already thinking of? This is the space for me.
This is an easy one, without a doubt. I was 11 years old, and I went to a performing arts middle school. And the local theater, the Alley Theater, which is the big regional theater in Houston, Texas, they were having auditions for A Christmas Carol. And so they called a lot of the students from the drama middle school to come and audition for like the Cratchit kids and the other kids in the play. And so I went and auditioned and I had to do a scene and I had to sing. And I'm not a great singer. I wasn't a great singer then. And so I got cut. I didn't make the callbacks for A Christmas Carol, right? And so I was pretty bummed. But the casting person at the Alliance at the Alley Theater said, there's this other play we're trying to cast. It's by this playwright who's, has a couple of plays, kind of starting to be a big deal. The play was Joe Turner's Come and Gone by August Wilson. And the director was Claude Purdy, who was August Wilson's best friend at the time. He's no longer with us. Neither one of those gentlemen are no longer with us. But Claude actually started. He got August to start writing plays because August was like this poet from Pittsburgh, and Claude got him to start writing plays. And so that's kind of how August got his start as a playwright, through Claude. But Lloyd Richards, famously of Yale, was responsible for putting August on the national scene or the international scene. And then once the shows left Broadway, Claude would often direct the regional premieres of those shows. So this was about 1990, and I think August had done Ma Rainey and Fences, and I think Piano Lesson. And so this was the next one, I believe. So this was the regional premiere of Joe Turner's Come and Gone, and they said, "Well, we got this other kid in this play, in this show, so maybe you can come and audition for that." And I got that part, and that's why I got to work with on my first August Wilson play, and that is the thing that set my trajectory. I said, I'm only going to do August Wilson plays for the rest of my life. I just love that family, that community that Claude had created, and that play. It just galvanized us. And matter of fact, I'm still in contact with several of those people in that company. That's been 35 years now. And I've completed all 10 of August's plays, either as an actor or director. Some of them I've done 2 and 3 times. And so it's just given me a lifetime of self-discovery through August's work, lifetime of employment. And I teach it at NYU. And so, that was the one, Joe Turner's Come and Gone, 1990.
I feel like there's a life lesson there. So you didn't get A Christmas Carol.
That's right.
But you were introduced to this body of brilliance that has carried you throughout your career. You later went on to Morehouse College, and you studied drama and mathematics.
That's right.
The drama part I get. Talk to me about studying mathematics and the ways that it feeds into the work that you do today.
Yeah, well, I had an aptitude for math and sciences. The high school that was in my neighborhood, I was zoned to, had a magnet program, which was an engineering part. And my mom was like, look, you're going to get the best of what these public schools have to offer. And so you're going to we all went through the engineering program because it was the school we were zoned to, whether we liked it or not. I just happened to have an aptitude for math and sciences. And so I enjoyed it to some degree. Still acting was my passion, but I got a scholarship to go to Morehouse, and Shell Oil Company was one of the sponsors of that scholarship, and so I would work for Shell Oil Company in my summer times as an intern doing chemical engineering, and so I had to major in something that looked like it was taking me towards the engineering route to keep my scholarship. But I knew I wasn't going to stick with it. But it afforded me, a ticket out of Texas and to see more of the country and to get to Morehouse. And I did well in math. But what I found is that my approach to acting and even directing, or just the arts in general, it has been really informed by my ability to problem solve. I think that's what art is. It's you're solving problems. That's what artists do. It's like, what is the problem in the world, and how can I uniquely solve this problem or offer a solution? Whether I'm solving it, but let me offer a solution. So as an actor, as a director, that's my hope, is that I'm doing work that potentially offers solutions to the audiences that are struggling with, how do I communicate with my parents or my children? How do I be more honest with myself? How do I be brave enough to take that chance that, I know might lead to something better for my life, but I'm just too afraid to do it. So, I think plays and movies and songs, they give us roadmaps and they give us potential solutions to life's problems. And that's what math is, right? I mean, we're looking at nature's, wonderment, and we're trying to mathematically come up with something predictable on how to engage with this world around us. I mean, that's what art is, right? We just look, it's just a set of math problems in an artistic way. So I do find that it's not as strange as most people think it is. And I tell my students as a teacher all the time, I said, look, if you're on stage, you're not trying to solve a problem, you're not acting. not doing anything.
I spend a lot of time around artists. I don't think
Yeah.
I've ever heard anyone describe art as a set of math problems. And yet
Yeah.
it makes perfect sense. The logic that goes into how do you take what you know and create something that you don't know that may be bigger than you, but see that trajectory. I'm thinking here of your appearance in the Tony Award winning Broadway production of All the Way. You
Mm,
play the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. in
yeah.
that production. Bryan Cranston plays Lyndon B. Johnson. And I
Mhm.
bring that up, Brandon, because we are inundated with problems and challenges right now. And
Right.
that's the kind of production that brings us back to remembering what was, the kinds of challenges that people went through, and for you as an actor to bring that to life. Talk to me about that experience of playing someone who is such a large figure, but bringing your unique approach to that role.
Yeah. That's a great question. Unique approach is I think that's the right way to describe it because it was a uniquely written version of Dr. King. It wasn't the Dr. King that we're so used to seeing in February, the I Have a Dream speech and the various sound bites that just get commercialized. This Dr. King that Robert Shankin was writing in All the Way, we saw much more of the politician. We saw much more of the man who had to try to keep these different factions of the movement together between, SCLC, the SNCC, CORE, and being the galvanizing force of this movement because he had the ear of LBJ and was able to have those one-on-one meetings with him to inspire change. So we got to see a side of Dr. King that isn't often celebrated. I mean, it's the politician. Uh, and so I learned so much more about this giant, and it demystified Dr. King for me in a way. And I mean, listen, I went to Morehouse's alma mater, and so I felt like I had known pretty much, a good majority of or had a great understanding of who this man was and his legacy. But to have to revisit Dr. King in this way, in terms of not just what sounds good or what gets me energized and or makes me feel motivated to do the morally correct thing as his speeches do, but this is more the strategist of Dr. King, right? So how do we take these different generational viewpoints, like between SCLC and then SNCC, right? The student movement, and how do we synthesize it? So I felt Dr. King was really caught in the crossroads in the middle of trying to speak for multiple generations of individuals and to present this in a coherent, synthesized manner to the powers that be, and so just the way he was able to navigate and articulate the concerns of many different generations was really eye opening. I mean, and it's not something that we get a whole lot of detailed information about. So yes, it was an absolute unique approach to be able to say, look, I can't really rely on the big speeches to create this human being. We have to offer the audience a much more nuanced version of all the minefields he had to navigate, not only with LBJ and the politicians, but also within his own factions. And so in one way that was pretty daunting because it's like, are we going to present a side of Dr. King that we aren't used to? And are we going to be satisfied that we don't have the I Have a Dream speech in this? And in another way, it was very freeing. It was like, no, I have the opportunity to reveal even more about this human, and how great of a strategist he was. And then you had Bryan Cranston as the lead, and so it's like, look, he at the time he was the #1 box office star in the world. Breaking Bad had just finished. It's like, I don't have to worry. I can just go in, do my job. People get to see Bryan, but I was mistaken in that. People, yes, they came to see Bryan, but once they were there, I think the story of that 1964-65 time period, and we're trying to get the Civil Rights Act passed. Yes, they were, again, Bryan was a draw, but once you're in a theater, people are paying attention to everything, and you can't just rely on, oh, let me hide because I know they're here to see Bryan Cranston. No, they're here to learn something. They're here to have their lives change in some way, whether they know it or not. And so it was, I found it just a great honor and a real responsibility to keep that history alive. And here we are, 2025, and we need that history. We need those instructions of what Dr. King and LBJ had to do to make progress in the country, because we need it now. You in a situation, we need it more than ever. So, it all adds up.
Talk to me about that responsibility. As an artist, you are not only presenting a figure like Dr. King that everyone feels some proximity to in some ways. Everybody marched with Dr. King if you let the public tell it now, right?
Right.
Everyone believed in him, even though we know that they didn't. There's that responsibility. It is also the responsibility of, now you've gotten people into the theater. They want to connect, and you now have the opportunity to present a conversation that most people shy away from. How do you see that responsibility as an artist?
I see it more as an opportunity. I mean, in addition to the responsibility, but as opposed to I have to do this, I often frame it as I get to do this. I think in general, whether we want to acknowledge it or not, that people love learning new things. I think everyone does. That's just how we're wired as human beings. That's how we survive. If we don't learn new things, we die. And that's not hyperbole. It's just a fact. You must learn new things in order to survive. And so I believe in that component of the human being, not the component that says, we all just want to just go along and get along, or we don't like friction, or we don't want to learn or expand ourselves. We just want to stay even, and it's too much. No. I truly, honestly believe that every single person, whether they know it or not, we love to learn new things that are going to add value to our lives. And if I get an opportunity to share the story that I know will enrich your life in some way, either give you more information so that you can go out and be a more informed citizen or member of your community, or you can be inspired to do that, just a small thing, not even the brave acts like Dr. King does, but I'm going to bring it to Eden. I think these people in Eden, the play that we're going to talk about today, they're very brave. And these are very micro, small acts that are that influence and affect their lives and the people around them, and not some big, huge change of the world, but it's a ripple effect. So I get an opportunity, not just a responsibility, but I get an opportunity to maybe offer you some advice as an artist, a cautionary tale, some inspiration. But bottom line is, you get to learn something without having to go through it. Right? So I think as an audience member, when you're watching a play, you're watching a movie, what you actually do, whether you're conscious of it, is you're playing every single role. You're putting yourself inside of that story because you're looking and says, what would I do in that situation? Your mind is automatically wired to ask those questions. Would I do that? And so when someone does something you don't disagree, like, you have a strong reaction to it because you're like, oh, I wouldn't do that, right? So you're putting yourself inside of this narrative, right? If it's a well-told story that you want to invest in. So if I get the opportunity to partner with you to where you're going to come out on the other side with a bigger imagination, maybe a bigger heart, it's a real privilege.
Coming up, more with Eden director Brandon J. Dirden. He'll talk about the forgotten history of Black creatives in theater.
I'm not starting this. I am carrying the flame forward and hopefully igniting more people who will carry the flame forward.
This is Disrupted. We'll be right back. Welcome back to Disrupted. I'm Kalila Brown-Dean. This hour, we're talking with actor and director Brandon J. Dirden. He's the director of Yale Repertory Theater's production of Eden. The play was written by Steve Carter in the 1970s. It focuses on the tension between two families living in the same Manhattan apartment building in 1927. I asked Brandon how he got involved with the production.
Well, faith. I'm a person of faith, and I think the universe. I know that's a big, lofty answer, but it's the truth. I believe the universe conspires in your favor. And I think this is one of those times where I've been on this trajectory of trying to honor these stories. I mean, Steve Carter predates August Wilson for sure, but I've been a student of the Negro Ensemble Company for many, many years, and the plays that came out of it. I mean, Home, Ceremonies and Dark Old Men, First Breeze of Summer. A lot of these shows I've gotten a chance to either act in or direct, over the decades as a professional artist, and so I just feel like what I am inspired to offer the American theatrical landscape at this point in my life is deeply rooted in the history of Black theater. And this was one of the seminal points in the 1960s and 70s with the Negro Ensemble Company, where this play came out of. And so to have an opportunity to bring the story to another generation, to a modern audience, it's wholly in line with everything I wanted to do with my career. I didn't pick the play. I got to give credit to our dramaturg, Tia Smith, who was a student at Yale, getting her MFA in dramaturgy. And there's another director, Owoye Tempo, who has a company called Classics. And they suggested to the artistic staff at Yale Rep that they consider this play. Yale has been on a mission to expand their definition of what a classic is. Of course, in the Yale's mission, they have a commitment to presenting classic plays and classic texts. And, 2020 taught us that a lot of organizations have been very remiss in not including some bona fide classics, of which Eden, I think, is. It certainly is. And so they want to make good. So James Bundy, the artistic director, called me about a year ago, and he says, "Hey, we got this play that's little known, hadn't been done, but we think it's a gem of a play, and we're interested in see if you would direct it. It's a play called Eden." I said, "By Steve Carter?" He said, "You know it?" I said, I did a production of it when I was in college at Morehouse almost 30 years ago. I played the youngest son in that. And so I knew the play very well. I mean, I don't think I was any good as an actor in the play that many years ago, but it was a show I was familiar with. And so I just jumped at it. I jumped at the chance to work on it again. And so it's more fate and destiny. And I think when you get really clear about how you want to spend your time on this earth, the universe, again, I would say it again, conspires in your favor. And when you show up, it'll show up, and you got your marching orders. And so it was more of it came out more of a calling or a preordained, situation. That, again, it don't mean to sound too hokey or off the beaten path here, but it's the truth. It's just something that just the right alignment, right time, right place.
I would say it's perfect alignment, a production that you were in as a college student to now have the opportunity. What do you think we need to know and remember about Steve Carter? Many people are discovering or rediscovering the work of August Wilson.
Yeah.
I feel like that we need that same renaissance of awareness of Steve Carter. What would you offer?
And it's not just, and I'll answer this, but it's not just Steve Carter. It's Alice Childress who's getting, some time with Trouble in Mind on Broadway recently. And I directed a production of Wine in the Wilderness recently of hers. And what we need to know is that we've been doing this for a very long time. And that we don't have to reinvent the wheel every time just because we assume no one has done it before. I think we have to go into the stacks. We have an origin story that is much, much, much longer and rich and deeper and complicated than what our short memories and our social media allows us to imagine. It takes some digging. It takes some, because Steve Carter, he was writing at a time before the internet, of course. And so you can't Google PDF versions of all of his plays or reviews of what was happening. It doesn't mean that he didn't exist and that these stories weren't as rich and as complicated as the things that we aspire to do now. You understand what I'm saying? So I think we have to first really reconsider our framing in that I see a lot of, let me take a step back. Now that I teach, I see a lot of young artists thinking, oh, I have to do something original because something that's never been done before. I have to fill in the gaps. I have to show that all of our humanity. Yes, you do. Yes, that is our responsibility to show all of our humanity as full as we possibly can. But I think they are misinformed that it hasn't been done before with some specificity. So Steve Carter's work is instructive. August Wilson's work is instructive. Alice Childress' work is instructive. Even Lorraine Hansberry, she wrote more than just Raising the Sun, which is a perfect play, one of the best plays ever. But there's more than that, right? And so I hope that it teaches us to go back to the stacks and see what else we've been missing out on that can help us find our voice, that can help us become the nuanced, versatile artists that we're looking to be. You understand what I'm saying? Is, when painters or musicians, when they're starting out, they're studying the greats. And I think we assume that we don't have a host of great Black playwrights. I think that's the assumption, just because we don't know, because they haven't been widely touted. And I think now is the time to say, no, they've been here. So we just got to roll up our sleeves and actually go to a library or go to the Schomburg in Harlem and interrogate our history. And we know that there's help, and we're part of a lineage. And that gives me great strength, and that gives me great purpose, and it gives me a real fire to know that I'm not starting this. I am carrying the flame forward and hopefully igniting more people who carry the flame forward. But I know I'm part of a legacy. I'm part of a lineage. And that, again, it feels so powerful to be a part of that.
And I've been saying to my friends, this will be our Sankofa year. This will be the year where we have to go back and harvest that knowledge to honor the complexity of our histories, of our brilliance, their legacies, and then figure out what our obligation and opportunities are to go forward. I saw this play the same week that the country was inaugurating a new president. We were honoring the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King. And to see this play that is set in 1927 in the San Juan Hill neighborhood of Manhattan, to see this picture of Marcus Garvey front and center in the set, thinking about what it meant that former President Biden had pardoned Garvey, the same ways that people are figuring out immigration, proximity, all of those things. Paint a picture for us of what New York was like at that time, because I was watching this play thinking, we need this reminder today, and imagining the sound, the texture of what New York may have been in 1927.
Yeah, that was one of my aims, to try and evoke a sense of immediacy of a 1927, right? I think all too often we look at these plays and we think they're museum pieces. So we look at them from behind the glass, right? That's not truly interactive, or we're sitting back and it's like, well, that's then. It doesn't really concern us now. And that's not very fun theater for me, So one of the challenges that I had is like, how do I really make 1927 three-dimensional for us in a way? And so talking to my designers, like, I didn't want any sepia tones. I didn't want any, things that look like you're looking at a photograph. No, I want the textures. I want the vibrancy of colors. I wanted the urgency of now, even though it's 27. So that meant that we as an audience member had to travel a little bit right there, but also the production has to travel a little bit into 2025. And so that we meet in a sacred space that is somewhere, in this nebulous zone, right? So I like that we can escape our circumstances for today and imagine ourselves in a different time to really get involved with these people's lives. And I think the actors and the designers have done a beautiful job with making 1927 feel like flesh and blood right before your eyes. Even the detailed sets, the soundscape. It's a remarkable thing that the rest of the artists have done to create this illusion, this magic act. That's what theater is. It's a magic act, right? We clearly know we're not in 1927, but somehow you're able to feel like you are, right? And feel like you belong there. So New York 1927, one thing that I did want was important to me that Steve Carter has suggested is that Black people aren't a monolith. We're not a monolith. It's not, most people think, oh, the Great Migration came up, with dust on your cloud hoppers and we're all poor and we all, scrubbing somebody's kitchen floors and this and that. And yet that is part of our legacy, yes. But then you have Lizzie Harris, the next door neighbor in this character who's a proprietor, who owns a pool hall, right? And we're talking about prohibition,
Yeah.
right? So to be a pool hall owner during prohibition,
And to be a woman pool hall owner,
that's
Black
right.
woman during Prohibition.
That's right. That's right. And then we learn, the aspirational qualities that Joseph Barton has for his children. And so the type of work that, his daughters are going out and procuring. But you also see that everybody in this play has a dream to improve their circumstances, right? And I think that's what Eden is really about, right? Eden, this place of where you're close to to God and you're close to being in your original purpose. And I think that's what everybody's looking for. Is Eden described like this utopia, this perfect place, and everybody's in the quest. And I think that's what New York in 1927 represented for all of these people. It's an opportunity to live in ideal circumstances, right? This is why Lizzie moves from the South, to the North. This is why Joseph Barton brings his family, because there's a hope that that 1927 New York, they moved before 1927, but that the turn of the century New York offers the potential to better your circumstances and live more fully in your purpose, right? And I think that's quite palpable in the world that Steve Carter has captured and what we're trying to offer our audiences, that these are still people in great desire and great want. And it's in the here and now. And the situations, right? The circumstances might be different, but the desires, the wants aren't very different from what we want now. And what do we want? We want to matter. We just want to matter, and everybody in this play wants to be seen. They want a chance at love. They want a chance at following their dreams. They want a chance at being an individual, recognized for their own sense of self-worth, And that's no different from what I see we want 100 years later. And the obstacles are no different,
Coming up, more with Eden director Brandon J. Dirden. We'll talk about respectability politics and how that shows up in the play.
Why are we carrying the water for this culture and for this and these ideals and penalizing other people when we clearly can recognize their humanity? We can see that, but we choose not to because it affords us some superiority. What is that about?
This is Disrupted. Stay with us. Welcome back to Disrupted. I'm Kalila Brown-Dean. This hour, we're talking with director Brandon J. Dirden about the play Eden. The play explores the challenges of being a parent. The parents in Eden want their children to have a better life and to avoid the kinds of mistakes that they made. But those plans don't always line up with what children want to do. Brandon is a parent himself, and I asked how that experience shapes the play.
You know what I discovered early on in the rehearsal of this play, and maybe I wouldn't have known this if I hadn't been a parent. But what Steve Carter so brilliantly does is that he gives even the older generation in this play, the mother, the aunt, an opportunity to learn from their children, right? And I don't know if I would have appreciated that as much if I weren't a parent. Every day, my 10-year-old son teaches me something. I mean, whether it's a TikTok dance or a meme, but not even that. I mean, he even as a young boy, I remember he was about 3 or maybe 4. And I remember a phrase he says, you know, the devil lives in hell and God lives in thank you. God lives in thank you. And I'll never forget that. I don't know how his mind works, but I took that and I was like, oh, right. It was my response. It is my opportunity and my responsibility to, as a parent, to learn from my children. And that's in this play as well. We see the mother, we see the aunt learning from a younger generation, right? And it's not so didactic, it's not so one-sided where you do what I say and I take you. But we also see the perils of that when you don't learn from your children. So we see what happens to Joseph Barton, the patriarch of the family, when he is so rigid and he is not malleable enough to be inspired to learn from newer generations, right? And so, like any play, it's a cautionary tale but it's also an inspirational story that we can learn from our children, and we should, and we're especially at a time in our country right now, in our world today, where young people have so many. They have many better answers than we could possibly have, and we got to pay attention to them because they have solutions that we need because it's going to be their world.
And
You
it
know,
takes a level of humility as a parent to be able to say, I'm not just here to teach them.
yeah,
They are a gift to teach us.
that's right.
And it takes vulnerability as a parent, and not just a biological parent, but anyone who's in a position working with
Right.
young people to practice that vulnerability that they know I don't have all the answers. I mess up. I make bad choices. I don't always get it
Right.
right. And so you see that with the mother being able
Yeah,
to say, I did what I thought was best, but
that's right.
maybe my daughters have a different path. In the audience that evening, Connecticut is a state where Black folks here often pursue one of those two paths. Either they came
Mhm.
from the Caribbean or they came from the South in terms of
Mhm.
older generations.
Right.
And I could hear at intermission some conversations happening of people feeling like, well, I don't know if we should have told people that there was this tension between people coming from, the Caribbean, West
Yeah.
Indian folks, people coming from the South. I don't know if we
Yeah.
should have put that out there. And I kind
Yeah.
of chuckled to say, well, we know it, we feel it, we experience, we live it. But that theme of respectability
Yeah.
politics comes through so powerfully in this play. How do
Yeah.
you see respectability politics, whether in Eden or in the broader stories of
Yeah.
we have to tell the complexity to honor the truth of who these communities are?
August Wilson had a phrase, and it's in the forward of Seven Guitars, and it's been really instructive for me through my career. Probably, August is probably my biggest teacher in life. But he had a phrase that he written in the forward, and I'm going to paraphrase, but it's something to the effect that the contents of my mother's pantry are worthy of the telling. And why I was so drawn to August and playwrights like Steve Carter and Alice Childress is that they are unafraid to tell what's in the cupboard because it is sustenance. It is sustenance, and it is stage worthy, and I deserve to see myself in my particular situations on any stage in the world. It has value, right? And so when we talk about respectability politics in this play, I don't think we can have this conversation without really going back and saying respectable to what? By what degree? Like, what's the measuring stick of respect that we're talking about when we say respectability politics? And in this play, I don't think we have to know that it really stems from my understanding, right, and my belief, from white supremacy. It really stems from that. So part of the respectability politics in this play is the language that is spoken and allowed to be spoken in the Barton household. It's the Queen's English, you know? And my thing is, what makes that so much more respectable than the African American vernacular? I remember my wife's father, who's from, grew up in Patterson, New Jersey, and so he has a very colorful way of talking, and sometimes the words that he uses aren't always quote unquote, correct or respectable. And I remember one time he said something and I knew what he meant, but I was like, Pop, is that really the word you want? He goes, and I was kind of ribbing him. And he says, let me ask you a question. Did you know what I was saying? And I said, yeah. He goes, all right, well, F you. Right. And I think, and that was a great lesson for me. It's like, why am I judging him, or why am I holding him to some standard or some ideal that I think is more appropriate when I clearly understood what he was communicating? Why can't I just accept the fact that that was his way of communicating, and it is just as honorable, just as noble, just as articulate as me with my 8 degrees or whatever, and my learned English, right?
And a
so
Morehouse man.
yeah. So that was a real eye opener to me, and so I look at this respectability politics, and I have to go and say, why are we doing this? Why are we carrying the water for this culture and for this and these ideals and penalizing other people when we clearly can recognize that their humanity? We can see that, but we choose not to because it affords us some superiority. What is that about? And so I look at Joseph Barton, the patriarch, and his family, and my heart breaks for him that he's caught in this cycle of thinking that education, or that you saying the right thing, or appearing the right way, or toeing the line, and it's going to be the thing. It's going to be the salvation for him and for his family. When in fact, somebody else sets those rules, right? And I think with respectability politics, we can get so lost in the sauce. We can get so ill-informed that we hold other people, we dehumanize other people for the sake of trying to build up this path that we're on, which we think is going to lead us to a better life. But it's always at the expense of somebody else, right? Now, that doesn't mean that we shouldn't have appropriate behavior and decorum to make people feel, welcome in spaces, or what I'm saying? I mean, so it's a nuanced conversation that needs to be had. But I don't think we can have this conversation without looking at its root causes and why, and what are those things which we're trying to emulate when it comes to what is respectful,
I've been thinking a lot about Toni Morrison lately, and her message that the function of racism is distraction, that it keeps you from doing the work that feeds you. It makes you feel like you constantly have to justify your being, your worth, or your existence. And in this play, we see one family who says, we don't have to live to someone else's standards. We deserve joy, and we will claim joy in our lives where we are. And another family who's always trying to reach some standard that by the end of the play, you realize no matter what you do, if you are doing it based on someone else's expectation, you will always fall short. Thinking about the power of theater, thinking about the things that we are encountering as a country, as a global nation, what would you say to audiences about the power of theater to help us connect and understand and move forward? What's that power?
Theater is one of those things that it's always been in existence. I mean, ever since we could build a fire and put drawings on caves to tell our stories, right? And it's irreplaceable because what it does, when you think about it, and it's, in most basic terms, we're sitting in a room. We don't get to pick who we sit next to or sit across from us, who's in front of behind us. We sit in a room, the lights go down, these people come on stage, and they tell a story. And somehow magically, everyone in the audience agrees that we're going to suspend our disbelief for this time. And we're just going to go with this story. And we're all going to play pretend on stage and off stage. We're just going to play pretend till we can put us in a space to where we can imagine the what if. And that's a very, very, very powerful set of 2 words, what if. And that we are sharing this experience in real time with strangers. And we all have a social contract that we didn't talk about beforehand. But somehow in our DNA, no matter what culture you come from, no matter your parentage, your lineage, your country of origin, you understand that we are going to gather as strangers and watch what a group of artists have prepared for us. And we aren't going to interrupt and talk back, but we're going to all play pretend and say, what if? You know? And that is a powerful, powerful, powerful medium. You can't do that in movies. You can't. You can't do that at a concert, you know, music. I mean, you have some touches of that, right? But anything can happen in the theater, and we all know that it's a high wire act that we're all on, right? Anything can happen at any given time. So we all collectively hold our breath and hope not to break that illusion of the what if, right? And so you can have those conversations at intermission, like, I don't know if I agree with that. Why this, right? You know, you're talking as if this is real, right? Because it is. Because we've all allowed ourselves to make it real. And no other medium, and you know, I do film, I do television, nothing else has that ability in the moment, in real time, to be that powerful and to unite us all, you know? So my message is see more theater so that we can just form deeper connections with random strangers. Even if we're not talking to them in the theater, right? We're still connected to them. Every audience has its own. It's so interesting. If you watch Eden on Tuesday and go watch it on Wednesday, you're going to have a completely different experience, not because the play is any different, but because the audience's makeup is different. And what somebody responds to informs your understanding of the play. You know what I mean? And that's a real power. And then what somebody responds to changes what the actor does, right? Because, you know, you're in conversation. And you can't have that conversation at a movie. You can't have it with your TV set, but you're still in conversation with those actors on stage and with the other members of the audience. You know what I mean? So it's just see more theater, but particularly see Eden.
You know, I've already had plans to go see Eden again for that very reason of what that experience is. And I want to thank you for reminding us not just about the power of theater, but the power of what if. And pursuing that with a sense of commitment, I think it's the thing that we need to be more connected and grounded and to imagine beyond where we are. Brandon J. Dirden is an actor, director, and associate arts professor in the graduate acting department at New York University's Tisch School of the Arts. He directed the Yale Repertory Theater production of Eden. Thank you, Brandon.
Oh, thank you.
Eden runs at Yale Repertory Theater until February 8th. Disrupted is produced by Kevin Chang Barnum, Robin Doyon-Aiken, Meg Fitzgerald, and Meg Dalton. You can listen to all the previous episodes of Disrupted by finding us wherever you get your podcasts. Just search for Disrupted and Connecticut Public. And if you love an episode, please remember to leave us a comment. You can listen to new episodes every Friday at 9 a.m. From Connecticut Public Radio, this is Disrupted. I'm Kalila Brown-Dean. Thanks for listening.